My wife Nicole and I have been married for just over a year. Our son Leo had turned 6 weeks old, that age where he barely sleeps at night and can smile in a way that makes you feel he already knows more than he should. Sometimes when his tiny fingers wrap around my thumb, the rest of the world simply stops mattering. There's only his soft breathing, and everything else fades. Nicole is one of those people who changes the air in a room just by walking into it. She doesn't have to speak, people just look. My younger sister once called her hypnotic, then blushed as if the word was too much. I brushed it off, but the word stuck in my head. Late in August, Nicole suggested we take a short trip to an old family cabin that had belonged to her great-grandfather. A couple of days in the Appalachian Mountains. "It's quiet there," she promised. "You'll really hear him breathe." She said it while pressing her lips to my temple as Leo squirmed in my arms. I wanted to say no. The baby was too young for trips. But I never could say no to Nicole. We left in the early evening. She insisted on driving. Leo fell asleep almost immediately, lulled by the hum of the engine. Nicole played an old playlist, scratchy like it had been ripped from vinyl. I recognized a couple of songs, but couldn't place the titles. That was unsettling, for reasons I couldn't name. The deeper we drove into the mountains, the narrower the road became. Asphalt turned into gravel, then into a single-lane dirt track lined with dense pines. The sky burned orange between the trees. When we finally reached the cabin, it looked exactly like something off a postcard. Small porch, 2 front windows, weathered shingles. I thought, we'll be fine here. It's peaceful. "I'll start the fire," Nicole said, taking the axe from the wood pile. The way she held it, balanced perfectly in her grip, looked almost practiced. I mentally shook it off and carried Leo inside. The smell inside was resin and dust, with a faint undertone of old paper. The front door opened into a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. Outside, the cabin looked small, but inside, the hallways seemed to stretch much farther than it should. Must be a trick of the light, I told myself. There was no electricity, only a kerosene lamp on a side table. I lit a match, brought the flame to the wick, and warm amber light spread across the walls. That's when I saw the first painting, a field stretching into the distance, with an old woman standing far off, almost too small to make out. Her lips, if you could call that faint curved lips, seemed to smile. The second painting was farther down the hall. The same field, but the old woman was closer. On the third, closer still. By the fifth, I could see the folds in her shawl. And the smile, too wide for her face. My gut tightened. I turned back toward the first one, then walked down again, comparing them. The brushwork was the same. One artist, no doubt, but the spacing between the woman and the cabin behind her seemed to shrink with each frame, like someone was folding the scene toward the center. "Nick?" I called. Only the steady thunk-thunk of the axe replied from outside. Leo stirred in his bassinet, and I busied myself with checking the bottle, adjusting his blanket. When I looked down the hall again, I noticed another painting that hadn't been there before. In this one, the old woman stood on the porch of a cabin. My stomach dropped. It was this porch, and she was holding an axe. Coincidence, I told myself. Old families keep old art. Maybe it's a local legend. Maybe it's not even the same woman, just a recurring motif. I tried to laugh at myself, but the sound was thin. The door creaked open, and Nicole stepped in with an armful of wood. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. She leaned over Leo, inhaling the top of his head with a soft smile. the warm, domestic kind. For a moment, all my unease fell apart into dust. "The hallway's weird," I said. "Feels longer inside than it looks outside." "It's just the old layout," she replied smoothly. "Long hallways kept the drafts down." We ate dinner, Leo sleeping in fits and starts. The fire's glow and the smell of resin made the room feel like an old photograph. Nicole spread out some family albums, sepia portraits of women in shawls, stern men with sharp collars, and children with solemn eyes. The cabin appeared in a few of them, its porch flanked by figures whose names were never written down. The faces were sharp, but the trees behind them blurred as though they'd moved while the camera waited. Leo's cry cut through the room without warning. I picked him up, rocked him gently. Nicole came up behind me, resting her hand on my chest, just over where his head lay. "Hear him breathing?" she whispered. I did, and in that moment, it felt like the only anchor I had. That night, we took shifts. Nicole went to bed first. I stayed up by the fire with Leo. The smell of warm milk mingled with the faint tang of pine sap. When I got up for another candle, I froze. There were more paintings in the hallway. This time, the old woman was inside the cabin's doorway. On the next, she was stepping into a hallway just like this one. Long, narrow, lined with closed doors. On the third, she was closer, the axe resting on her shoulder, and her smile. Her smile was not old at all. It was smooth, familiar. I lifted the candle closer. In the bottom corner of each painting was a date, barely visible under the varnish. I traced it with my finger. The varnish felt fresh. From the bedroom, Nicole murmured something. I couldn't make out the words, more like a soft shuffle of sound. I peeked in. Moonlight sliced the room in half. She was lying on her side, the blanket drawn to her face, and she was smiling. Not the sleepy smile of a dreamer, but the still fixed smile of someone watching through a crack in the door. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like minutes. When she sighed audibly, relief flooded me. Stupid, irrational relief. I went back to the living room. The candle's glow reached only a few steps into the hall. On the far wall hung a new painting. The old woman, no, Nicole, was standing at the far end of this hallway, in her shawl with her axe. One hand was raised, as if about to knock on a door. The next painting showed her knocking. In the strip of light inside, I could see a man holding a baby, his elbow, with a faint scrape from a stroller latch. My faded t-shirt, my profile. I wanted to yell for Nicole, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat was ice, my legs felt hollow. Leo shifted in his sleep, gave a soft whimper, then settled. That should have comforted me. Somehow, it didn't. From outside came the thunk-thunk of the axe. Steady, too steady for this hour. I stepped forward, lifting the candle. The next painting showed her looking over her shoulder, the axe held dangerously close to her face, like a mirror. Her lips were painted in a warm peach shade I recognized, the lipstick Nicole almost never wore. Almost. In that instant, I realized my mistake. It wasn't an old woman at all. The face was too smooth, the cheeks too young. It was Nicole, dressed in her great-grandmother's clothes, painted into the hallway's story, one frame at a time. Downstairs, a door creaked open, slowly, carefully, as if she didn't want to wake the baby. I scooped Leo up. He was warm, heavy, smelling of milk and something else. I sniffed again. Varnish. The same varnish that coated those paintings. "Dan?" Nicole's voice floated from the darkness, gentle, familiar, too familiar. "You're not asleep?" Somewhere in the hall's deep shadow, I knew there was another painting waiting. I didn't need to see it, to know what it showed. Nicole had entered. "I hear him breathing," she said softly. "Don't you?" And I did. Leo's little chest rose and fell. I clutched him tighter and realized I could protect him now, but I didn't know from what. Nicole took the first night shift, leaving me by the fire with Leo. His tiny breaths were soft, almost rhythmic, but I couldn't relax. The firelight flickered across the wooden walls, casting long shadows that twitched like living things. The smell of pine sap mixed with the faint, sour-sweet scent of warm milk. I decided to light another candle before my shift ended. When I stepped into the hallway, I froze. There were more paintings now. I was sure of it. I'd counted them earlier, 5. Now there were at least 8. The first few still showed the old woman at a distance, but the newer ones, she was inside the cabin's doorway. In the next, she was stepping into a hallway that looked exactly like ours. Narrow, lined with shut doors. Another showed her much closer, an axe resting on her shoulder, and her smile was wrong. Not weathered and wrinkled like before, but smoother, younger. Something about it tugged at my memory. I lifted the candle closer and noticed, for the first time, faint dates painted at the bottom corners. They were hard to make out under a fresh layer of varnish. Fresh. That word lodged in my brain like a splinter. From the bedroom, Nicole murmured something, a low, indecipherable sound. I leaned in, thinking she'd woken. The moonlight cut a silver stripe across the bed. She was lying on her side, eyes closed, but smiling. Not a sleepy, content smile, a still, deliberate one, like she was listening for something. I backed away, pulse hammering, and returned to the living room. A new painting hung at the far end of the hall. My stomach knotted as I stepped closer. The old woman. No, I saw it now. It wasn't an old woman. Was standing at the far end of this hallway. She wore a shawl, held the axe in one hand, and in the other, a raised hand, fingers curled as if ready to knock on a door. In the next painting, she was knocking. Through a sliver of light inside, I could see a man holding a baby. My elbow scraped from the stroller latch, my faded t-shirt, my own profile. The candle trembled in my hand. Leo stirred, gave a soft whimper, then went still again. That should have comforted me. It didn't. From outside came the thunk, thunk of the axe, steady, too steady for this late. I glanced at the next painting and felt the world tilt. The woman was looking over her shoulder now, the axe angled toward her face as if it were a mirror. Her lips were painted in a warm peach shade I recognized. Nicole's lipstick, the one she almost never wore. My throat tightened. It wasn't an old woman at all. The face was too smooth, the jawline familiar. It was Nicole. Nicole, dressed in her great-grandmother's clothes, painted into the hallway's story one frame at a time. A floorboard creaked. Somewhere deep in the hallway, a door opened slowly, like whoever was on the other side didn't want to wake the baby. I scooped Leo up. He was warm, heavy in my arms, smelling of milk and something else. Varnish. "Dan?" Nicole's voice floated from the shadows. Gentle. Familiar. Too familiar. "You're not asleep?" My grip tightened on Leo. I didn't answer. "Come here," she whispered. "I want you to see something." I backed toward the front door, every nerve screaming. The hall seemed longer now, stretching impossibly far, each step echoing in a way that didn't belong to the cabin. Somewhere in that darkness, I knew there was another painting. The final one. I didn't need to see it to know what it would show. Nicole had entered. "I hear him breathing," she said softly. "Don't you?" And I did. I heard Leo's breath, small and steady against my chest, my only anchor. The axe's thunk outside had stopped. I turned the knob and stepped into the cold night air. The forest loomed silent, every tree a shadow. Somewhere behind me, the door began to close on its own. The last thing I heard before it latched was Nicole's voice, calm and certain. "You can't keep him from me forever."